So I wonder.
There you go.
Hello, my name is Dan Skip Allen, and this is part one of a series, a five-part series that I'm doing called My Life, My Love, 50 Years in Film, celebrating my 50 years of film leading up to my 50th birthday. I'm not yet 50 years old. I got a few more months to go before I get there. So, what I was thinking of doing is doing a series celebrating my life through film. And I'm going to get some friends along the way to celebrate 10 years at a time. And right now, what I'm doing is celebrating from 1974 to 1983. And I haven't, of course, I have the person I thought of right away that was kind of alive during those years, same as me, who might know a few movies and know a little bit about the movies that came out back then, is my good buddy Sandy Robinson. Sandy, how you doing?
Dan, my buddy, I am doing well. I can't complain about anything. You know what? This was a great idea when you brought it to me. I was so happy. I immediately thought that, you know what, you pick me for the 80s, but because you and I are so close in age, I'm just a year older than a little bit over a year older than you are. So yeah, we came up in this time. This is when movies started to become, I mean, not so much when we were babies, but soon afterwards we started to, enter movies, and they started to become something of, what would become part of our lives for the rest of our lives. So um there's a lot of good movies in the 70s, man. A lot of good movies in the 70s and early 80s. So I'm tickled to do this.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is the whole idea of this is I'm gonna start with 1974, my birth year, and the film, of course, that I have picked for 1974 is none other than The Godfather Part Two, one of my favorite films of all time. Of course, I was gonna pick this film. I mean, it is Michael Corleone goes into hell. He kind of went into hell by the end of The Godfather. Now he's in hell, and he's this is all these people that are trying to get him. And but the movie has a split story where we get to see his father come up and come from Italy, or not even he doesn't even get his own name. And Andolini is his real name, but they end up calling him Corleone because of where he comes from. So he becomes Vito Corleone. And we get this split storyline with Michael kind of having to deal with politicians, people trying to get him, including his own brother and some other people. And so, but we have De Niro playing Vito, the young Vito in the past, and then Michael playing him in
Al Pacino playing him.
yeah, Al Pacino playing Michael in the present. And it's just one of those movies that's got so much. I've been on another podcast called Picture This with Dylan Randazzo and Chadwick Webb, and we discussed the films of Oscar-nominated films of 1974, and of course, at length we discussed The Godfather Part Two. So my question for you: that's my favorite film of the year. What is yours? Do you have any thoughts about The Godfather Part Two, and what if you have anything that is different than that?
It's definitely different. My movie is definitely different, and like really different than the one that you picked. I'll touch a little bit on yours. I've never been a big Godfather fan. I never have been. I enjoy the movies. I think that they're really well
Did you hear
done. They're
me?
really well, sort of. No, I didn't. Can you hear me, Dan? Hello? Dan, can you hear me, Dan?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
can hear you.
No, I didn't hear you. So when I was talking there, did you sort of blinked out for a second?
Yeah, yeah, I know. We already had this discussion before, so just say what you
That's
got to
right.
say,
So
and we're good.
yeah,
Good.
Um, I think one of my favorite directors of all time is Francis Ford Coppola. So I love everything that he does, to a certain point. Apocalypse Now is one of my favorite movies that he does, and I can't watch it all the time because it's really, really disturbing. I find that sort of the same thing with the Godfathers. Once I've seen them, I've sort of seen them, and as much as I appreciate them, I don't watch them all the time. So my movie that I picked for this one. I understand in this day and age that this could be an issue, but my favorite movie from that year is Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles to me is an absolute hilarious movie from start to finish. It really does showcase the brilliance of Mel Brooks. I think the people who are in that movie fit what they're doing at the time. Is there some cringeworthy stuff in there? Yeah, there is. But you can't change the past, and the past is there for us to learn from and to grow from. And as much as I still find Blazing Saddles hilarious, it does have some parts in it that you sit back and go, yeah, I'm not sure about that, but it is my favorite movie from that year. I had some honorable mentions in that day, in that year. The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds. I think that's a great movie, and one of my favorite James Bond movies is The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah, I love both of those movies. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, but I'm actually a bigger fan of the other Mel Brooks movie that came out that year, Young Frankenstein.
Yeah,
I can't
Frankenstein.
get enough of Young Frankenstein.
It's
I
a good
love
movie.
Young
I tossed up the
Frankenstein.
two.
Yeah. So now we're gonna go to 1975, and my pick for 1975 is none other than Jaws. New England, I'm from New England, and Amityville is like kind of like Rhode Island. They actually filmed it in Rhode Island, and
Yep.
I just the fact that this movie was like a mistake. It was, I mean, the uh, the shark Bruce wasn't working, and it was all these. So they thought, well, what if we filmed it where nobody sees the shark hardly? We barely see the shark. You know what I mean? And but then Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss and just the mayor and just and you can't. I mean, probably one of the greatest scores of all time by John Williams, who he worked with Spielberg for decades, 50 something years. He did a film with him this year called The Fableman. So we
Yep.
know he'd been working with Spielberg for a long time. But that dun 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 dun
Perfect.
dun 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 dun.
Yep. It's just
Coined the phrase.
yeah. It's such a good movie. It's on my list that I had on there, but it's not my favorite movie from this year. My favorite movie is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. But I'll touch on Jaws for a second. This movie absolutely terrified me, and it's still to this day. I mean, I know what's coming. I've seen it a billion times. I know it's coming. I know when it's coming. It doesn't matter. It still creeps me out to this day. Large bodies of water I still can't swim in comfortably because I don't know what's underneath the water, and it was all because of Jaws that did that. So and you mentioned the Fablemans. If you watch the Fablemans, and it's basically an autobiography. You can tell at a young age that Steven Spielberg is absolutely a think out of the box type of director. If one thing isn't working, move on to something else to make it work. And what a stroke of genius! The big shark doesn't, the big reveal doesn't work, so you make it the big non-reveal, and you scare the pants out of every single person in that movie theater by not showing the shark. It made it more terrifying. So hands off, this is absolutely a great movie for this year. But my favorite movie is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This movie
Oh
is one of
wow.
my favorite movies of all time. It is brilliantly acted by everybody in it. Jack Nicholson has an Oscar worthy performance in this movie. Everybody, I mean, for crying out loud, the name Nurse Ratched is in our lexicon for every mean nurse in the history of nurses. So that shows you right there that the movie had impact. It is just fantastic from start to finish. Is it tough to watch? Yeah, it's tough to watch, but only because you feel for the people who are in there. You feel for the people who are losing their minds and are not whole and how they're being manipulated throughout the movie. You feel for them, and it's sad in a little bit of a way, but it's such a great performance that you look beyond it and you just watch it. So that's my pick for this one. But I did have a couple of extra ones to mention. I did not want to like jump out of Monty Python's Holy Grail. Fantastic cult movie. Everybody that's of our age loves that movie for some reason. And Jaws is the other one that I had on my list. So yeah, absolutely fantastic choice on your end.
Yeah, I mean, look, I cut out a little bit there. So the thing about Jaws is that people forget that we all talk about this word called blockbuster,
Yeah,
and some are blockbusters and this and that. Well, the movie that coined the phrase blockbuster was Jaws.
Jaws.
People were lined up around the block, down the block for, you know, because of the popularity of this movie. And then we started developing this as a summer thing, and the big budget movies were the things that came out all summer long, all the summer, and then people
Yep.
would line up like that. And so when you have a movie like Jaws and it coins something that we all talk about now, 50 years later, 49 years later, it tells you that it means something. And obviously when you're dealing with John Williams and Steven Spielberg, they're huge mass of people in the movie industry. And this is some of the stuffs in this was a mistake, and it turned out to be gold, priceless
Yeah.
gold. And so that's why
I'm, gl-
Jaws is my. Go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned the blockbuster because Steven Spielberg started it, but in a couple of years from now, we're going to meet the person who perfected it. So
Yeah.
absolutely,
Oh yeah. No, I mean I know. I mean, but they're also friends. People forget, and
they're
I'm not going to get
great
into this right
friends.
now.
No,
Yeah, we're
great
not going to get
friends.
into that just yet.
Yep.
But so Jaws is my number 1975. And one of the things about this is some of these years I just couldn't narrow it down to one, and I have two, and I got two in a few of these years, and I just because I couldn't narrow it down to one.
I
It's
felt
just
the same way.
it's just nature that you can't narrow it down to one. So 1976, I could have did three, but I'm like, I don't want to get greedy and do three films. Then it's not your favorite film of the year. But people can go with two, you know what I'm saying? But if you start doing three, it's not really your favorite film of the year. You got three. So I really wish I could have put three. I wanted to do three, and I said, no, you can't do three. So I narrowed it down to my two, and the first one is Rocky. As a sports fan, you know me, Sandy. We've done bleacher features together, and I mean it's the greatest underdog story there ever. Yeah, is it
Always.
a real person? No, it's based on a down and out boxer in Philly that he took the name, he took that guy's story in a lot of ways, and then Sylvester Stallone did his own thing with it, and then the score. But the supporting cast with Talia Shire, Burt
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 Young,
Burt Young and Burgess Meredith and
Burgess
Carl Weathers
Meredith, Carl
as
Weathers.
Apollo Creed. I mean, how could I not have this is one of my favorite films of 1976? And I mean, it's just an absolute masterpiece of a film. And he wrote it, and he's kind of excommunicated from the and people like that. So it's kind of sad to see stuff like that happen. But and
But
my go ahead.
But the best part
You have
about
something you want to say?
picking no, the best part about picking
No,
Rocky, which I also
I
did,
don't know.
so I agree with you 100% on this pick. They're still making Rocky movies. Don't kid yourself out there, folks. Creed is a Rocky movie. Creed 2 is a Rocky movie. Creed 3 is a Rocky movie. Even though he's not in it, it does not matter. This is all built off of Rocky's back and like the motion picture. I'm not talking Sylvester Stallone. I'm talking of the motion picture. All of what we see today is built off of this one. I would even consider it an indie movie at the time. And this one indie,
Oh
the
yeah.
small budget movie from some unknown dude who said, "Well, okay, I just want to make extra money. I'll write it too." And that's just that's what makes this movie a true underdog story, because in a lot of ways Stallone was the underdog in Hollywood and he had to fight to make this movie. So no, it's I might have more on my list, but this is the one. So yeah, up 100% agree.
Yeah, no, I love what you said. I have to say, yeah. I mean, it's that's why he's still an executive producer of Creed 3 because everybody knows they're using the characters that he created way
Exactly.
back in 1976, and so he's continuously getting back end points off of all the Creed movies, and
Yep.
we're going to be getting a Drago movie here pretty soon. So they're just capitalizing,
Yep.
capitalizing to no end off of Rocky. But so and my thing is, I'm an underdog in life. I felt like my life was an underdog, and so I could really resonate with Rocky a lot. You know what I mean? And so my second one is the antithesis of Rocky, and that is Taxi Driver. And Taxi Driver is about this loner who can't go to sleep, and he decides he's going to become a taxi driver at night because he can't sleep. But he's got these problems with himself, and he tries to date this girl who's working for the senator who's got a campaign. Then he tries to save this other little girl who's being a prostitute for this pimp played by Harvey Keitel. And then you even get the director who's like, hey, no, I don't want you to drive me around. I just want you to sit here. I'm paying you to just let me sit here. You see that shadow up in the window? That's my wife. She's cheating on me with that black guy up there. And it's just this seedy world of New York in the 70s. And you get to see this kind of this really nasty place through the eyes of this taxi driver who's not actually the nicest guy. He gets a guy, he buys a bunch of guns, and then he's looking in there. Are you talking to me? It's really a shady character who's got some problems upstairs. But for me, in a lot of ways, it reminded me of myself, a loner, a person who's really has a tough life, a person who's really had a really tough growing up, and who's an adult who feels like he's by himself a lot of the time. He had nobody on his side, and I really resonated with Travis Bickle a lot. But my favorite actor is Robert De Niro, and my favorite director is Martin Scorsese. And so I couldn't narrow 1976 down to just Rocky. I had to put Taxi Driver in there.
Absolutely. And when I saw your list and I saw that on there, I'm like, I almost thought for sure that it was just going to be Taxi Driver and not Rocky, because I thought maybe you were going to choose between. And then when I saw your list, and I'm like, nah, you couldn't choose because you can't. Those, for you especially, those two movies resonate with you so much. And as much as I like Rocky, I'll be honest, not a big fan of Taxi Driver, just because it's really tough subject matter to watch. But the performance is great. I mean, you mentioned the little prostitute, Jodie Foster. She gets her start back then. What would the world and movies be like without Jodie Foster in them? So that's a big deal as well. But like, you've got like this group of people in this movie who are playing not so good characters, but it works in the movie and it makes you feel uncomfortable watching it, but that's what it's supposed to do. So if you were going to pick two movies out of this year, those are the two.
Yeah. And if I had a third pick, it was going to be All the President's Men.
That's the other one on
We
my
love
list.
all the President's Men. I love it.
Yep.
But your pick was Rocky then?
My pick was Rocky. My two before was All the President's Men, and Network came out in that year as
Okay.
well. And Network's a fantastic movie. So
All right, now we're on to 1977. I have a feeling what your pick is going to be, but we might have the same pick because my pick is Star Wars in 1977. And as a kid growing up, I did not see Star Wars in the theater. I saw it later on, a couple years later, because I wasn't old enough to consciously kind of have that as something I could go to the movie theater, or my parents could take me to go see Star Wars. But as years have gone by, I just absolutely loved Star Wars, and I just that farm boy and the wizard and the walking talking dog and the western kind of gunslinger with Han Solo. Those are the two that resonated with me the most, was Han Solo and Chewbacca. Because the gunslinger, who shot first, he's sitting, and then the other thing is I'm a huge fan of Casablanca, and they used the set of Rick's American Cafe American as the set of the Mos Eisley Cantina. Then
Yep.
you have this nasty character, Darth Vader. I mean, George. I mean, in a lot of this is like props and little things like that. But he made it look so amazing. He just made it look so realistic for the time, 1977. It looks incredible. But I want to turn it over to you, Sandy. I'm sure your pick is the same thing. Go ahead.
It is. It is. Although 77 is a great year for movies. Just before I get into Star Wars, I had Slapshot, Saturday Night Fever, Pumping Iron, Smokey and the Bandit are some of the movies that came out in 77, which are all great movies. They're all great movies. But if you're going to talk about one movie in 1977, a movie that I actually did see in the theater, I don't remember it, but I actually went to the theater, was Star Wars. And it became such a huge part of my actual life because I resonated with everybody, all of the characters. I loved them all. The droids, they got their spot. Luke's got his spot. Everybody's got their spot and they play them perfectly. That's why the movie works. It's an ensemble cast of nobodies and you get them together and they make magic. Say what you want about George Lucas, but we don't get the movies that we get nowadays without George Lucas doing what he did. And that is create an entire division of Lucasfilm called Industrial Light and Magic. Without Industrial Light and Magic, some of the movies that we love nowadays don't exist. Because he had the fortitude and the stubbornness to go, I'm not chinsing out on this. You guys are going to do it this way if I have to create it. And that's what he did. And now we have an entire universe of Star Wars that we love. I mean, it just premiered today, The Mandalorian. That's from Star Wars. It started with a guy that showed up on the stupidest Christmas special of all time, the Star Wars Christmas special. And we get to see Boba Fett. You know, he's the Mandalorian. He's what everybody loved after that. And it was the worst. It was the worst. But even George Lucas in the worst thing can create something in it that we all love and then we all enjoy. It's we could sit here for an hour and 2 hours, 3 hours and just talk Star Wars. But the fact that it was 1977, nothing had really come across. I mean, we'd have, Flash Gordon in the, the early, the black and white television days, but it was all done with props and strings and, maquettes and crap like that. So it didn't, and as awesome as that was back then, it wasn't cutting edge and it wouldn't have gotten people to line up 15 times around Mann's Chinese Theater to go and see a premiere of a movie. If it had, chintzy on wire special effects, nobody would have believed that we were in another place out in the universe. So, it's as many good movies that came out in that year. Star Wars, heads, tails, bodies above everything else. It's just a fantastic work of cinema, and it's why it's on everybody's favorite lists.
Yeah, and and there's a documentary about how all that stuff that you're talking about, light and magic. And then the other thing is, people forget that these movies came out so long ago that George Lucas sold the rights to all these movies to Disney. But what's still is ILM is still one of the biggest technological houses regarding special effects, animation, sound, all that stuff in Hollywood. And that has transcended him as a director and writer.
Yep.
That's how important that has become to the movie industry.
I like to think of George Lucas is in like the Wizard of Oz. There's this entire land out there created by one dude, and he's this big head behind this curtain. And that's all you see when you go. George Lucas just pops up there and goes, "Welcome to Star Wars land." And that's the world. That the world he lives in is what he's created. And I don't think he loses an inch of sleep ever for anything. I think he's created everything that he wanted to, and when he wanted to let it go, he let it go.
Yeah, that absolutely. And I alluded to it before. Him and Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and Steven Spielberg were all close friends.
Yep.
And you could see the films that the four of those guys have created. It's like,
And you saw it in the Fablemans, like he was going to get an opportunity to work in the studios and then decided, no, I can go make my own stuff out there. So that's what they all did. They all said, you know what, I can't make the movies that you guys want me to make. They're not, we need to break the world. We need to break open this talent that we have. Brian De Palma, also a fan, a friend of those guys. So this group of young directors came out and literally in the 70s changed the entire world of filmmaking and movie going. And I think for the better.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. My next 2 years are gonna be something similar, but because I really was gonna pick something different from '78, and I chose to pick this one because a friend of mine he was alive a little bit longer than me years ago, and he kind of turned me on to this movie. I hadn't seen it, and then he turned me on to this movie, and just the kind of camaraderie of the friends, and then you're in the town, you're in your kind of your town, you're going to a buddy's wedding, you're going to the bar having a few drinks, and that's but then when they go over to war, it's completely different, and that is the Deer Hunter. And as somebody who didn't have a lot of friends, but as I got older, I had kind of gotten friends. We would hang out with coaching buddies. We'd go to the bar. We'd hang out after the football game, or buddies. We'd go get some pizza after the basketball game because I coach football and basketball or whatever. And then I just started hanging out at the bar myself. But these guys, they lived in this steel town, Pennsylvania town. They were buddies. They would go hunting on the weekends, and then they go to one of the buddies' weddings or something. And it's just like this kind of down home feel. And then all of a sudden, it's like this whole new world when they go off to war in Vietnam. And then some of the things that happen, it changes you as a human being. And then you come back and you're like a different person altogether. And some of the things that happen over in war. And I really felt like it showed what war was really like for people, and how happy these people were, and they were working class people in Western Pennsylvania, and then all of a sudden, it was just different. I was gonna pick something different. I said, nah, I gotta go with the Deer Hunter.
I will be 100% honest. I've only seen snippets of this movie.
Oh
Every
wow.
once in a while, I see it on TV. I'll sit there and watch it for 20 minutes and then move on. So I've never seen it on its way through. I know who's in it. I know what it's about. I think it's a very fascinating to hear people talk about it because people who talk about it genuinely really love the movie. So it's something that's on my list to watch. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But it's a fantastic choice. My movies from this
So
decade
my guess
or
is
from
you got something different.
I do. I have something different. This is another year that had a ton of movies in it and of movies I love. So to narrow it down was really it wasn't super tough in this one, but the three that I ended up with are interchangeable. Like I don't have one specific one. I'll pick one just because we have to. So I'll mention the two honorable mentions that are A, B, and C. Grease came out this year. Uh, I may not look at like it, but and I'm not a big fan of musicals nowadays. But Grease was one of those ones that my mom really enjoyed when I was growing up, and we would listen to the soundtrack all the time. So when the movie came out, I went to the theater with her to see it, and we really loved it. And I love it to this day, even though it's the bane of my existence because the main heroine character, Olivia Newton-John's name is Sandy, and as you can see on the screen, so is mine. And children can be cruel to one another, and so I was mercilessly picked on because of my name for almost my entire schooling until college. So yeah, good movies can be good movies and they can still cause you pain. But that was just one of them. My second one that I will mention is Animal House. I think Animal House is one of the best college type movies that are out there. It's funny. It's got so many good stars in it. So many people who weren't stars at the time who are stars now. It's a fantastic movie. But my pick for 1978 is should be no surprise. It is Superman the movie. This movie, I could not get out of the theater and not fly around my neighborhood like I was Superman, running around like any little kid would, pretending to fly. This is it's a great movie. It's a great, it's, I know we do it, that gets done too much nowadays where we have like stories, like people telling the same origin story over and over and over and over again. This was it done to perfection. Like Superman the movie's origin story was done perfectly. You spent like not a little less than half of the movie dealing with Clark trying to find out from being a baby and coming from, we see the great Marlon Brando on Krypton. Krypton blows up, sends his kid to Earth. We see that whole journey. We get him on Earth. He's a baby, he's a kid, he's a teenager, he's an adult. He leaves home to go and find himself, becomes Superman, and the next thing we know, he's saving things all over the place. Gene Hackman, of course, playing the great Lex Luthor, probably the best portrayal of Lex Luthor in all of movies and television. Just sinister, but not over the top sinister, you know what I mean? Like, and we've talked about him before. Ned Beatty playing Otis, his befuddled, bummed up dude, just can't do anything right. I still love in Superman 2 when the map and he's got Otisburg written down on the little map, and Ned and Gene Hackman's like, Otisburg, Otisburg, and he just flips out and smashes the thing. It's great, and he plays such a good bumbling idiot. But this movie really did bring to life what its catchphrase was: "You'll believe a man can fly." I believe the man could fly, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly, and even though I'm scared of heights, I still wanted to fly. So, you know what? If you can do a movie like that, and like, I know a lot of people right now, including myself, are PO'd with the new DC universe and Henry Cavill getting the boot as Superman. But honestly, it happens to everybody. Everybody gets replaced as Superman from one time or another. And Christopher Reeve, unfortunately, had his being replaced due to an accident, or they probably could have made way more movies with him because he was fantastic. Literally the best Superman out there. He just played Clark Kent and Superman both perfectly. So yeah, Superman the movie 1978. I couldn't possibly have anything more to say about this movie except that I love it. I love it to this day.
Yeah, that was my other one that I was really I batted it back and forth. Should I do a second one that year? But I had so many years that I did two, and I was like, I gotta narrow it down some of these years to one. And one of the years that I had to narrow it down was 78 and 79. And I love Superman. I mean, just that score by John Wayne. And one of my favorite quotes of all time. I got you, don't worry. You got me. Who's got you? I mean, how can you go wrong?
You can't.
What a great quote,
And like you said it before about Jaws. Yeah, I mean, like Superman doesn't hit home as much if it doesn't have that John Williams score. That it's still, whenever I hear it, it still brings goosebumps to me. It's still like I get goosebumps, like physical. I get a physical reaction on my skin whenever I hear that song and that theme song. It's so good, and that's part of why John Williams is John Williams. Like he's that good. So
he was hitting on all cylinders back in the 70s and early 80s. I mean, it was just like he couldn't miss. I mean, he could not miss.
He could fire an arrow behind him and hit a bullseye.
Huh?
He could shoot an arrow behind him, not even looking, and hit a bullseye.
Yeah. John Williams and people don't know this about me, but the hat says it all. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and one of the things we did as a kid, we would go to. They would do the Boston Pops 4th of July celebration every summer at the Esplanade in Boston. And we'd go there, and John Williams would be playing all his classic songs when I was a kid before he let the Boston Pops go. But I was growing up when we got to actually see John Williams conducting the Boston Pops when I was a kid. And so that is a treat in and of itself growing up. You get to see that. Yeah, everybody, because I'm always hearing, he's going to the Hollywood Bowl. I'm like, yeah, man, I want to go to the Hollywood Bowl and see that. But I did get to see him as a kid. Every summer we would go. So,
nice. Awesome.
But So now we're going to move on to 1979, and it's a similar pick to 1978, but it's different in a lot of different ways. You get this guy Martin Sheen who's kind of had enough of life. He's kind of hiding out in a room, and they come and get him, and they're like, "Hey, dude, we got a mission for you. We need you to go up this river and find this guy who's gone cuckoo, and we need you to bring him back." And along the way, he meets all these crazy characters. Plus, the people on the boat are a little wackadoo. Robert Duvall wants to surf, and then you got the crazy photographer with Dennis Hopper's the crazy
Dennis
photographer who's
Yeah.
been sucked into this whole world, and of course, Marlon Brando as Colonel Kurtz is in a whole world of his own in there. And these guys have fallen in love with this guy. He's like their god and stuff. But he's, as a person away from the film, is just kind of gone into the toilet. He can't remember his lines. He's got Post-it notes everywhere.
Yep.
I mean, this and the whole production is, they've made documentaries about the making of Apocalypse Now. That's how crazy. And there's 3 different cuts of the movie. But to me, this is probably top 2 or 3 war movies of all time for me, because it just really shows you how, and towards the end of The Deer Hunter, but now you get to see the full brunt of what this war was, why it was such a useless war, how many men and women died in this war, and how it took a toll on the country and the people in the country as a whole. And it's an absolute masterpiece for me, Apocalypse Now is. And I'm going back to Coppola once again, and I'm going back to Brando and some of these guys. It's just, I could have picked something else, but I just feel more akin to this movie because of just the craziness and the wildness and the wackiness and the odd characters, and just this one sane character, one sane guy. At the beginning, he's not really doing that good, but he's really the only sane guy in this whole bunch of people, and that's Martin Sheen, but well, I don't know what your pick is for 79, but mine was Apocalypse Now.
So I batted around Apocalypse Now and the one that I ended up choosing. Apocalypse Now, like I've already said, Francis Ford Coppola is one of my favorite directors of all time. This is just a masterpiece of a movie. It just is. Like, you're right. Martin Sheen is the only, and he's not as sane as we'd like him to believe, but he's the only sane one in a group of absolute crazy nutcases. Everybody else has got some kind of defect going on, where it's just they seem normal and all of a sudden they're dancing around going bah, and you're like, what the? Yeah, they're just nuts. Like, they're just nuts. But that's the point of the movie. The point of the movie is to show you this is what this war did to people. This is what it did to their minds. There was so much crap going on. There was so much just kill anything going on, and it really, really, really messed with people's minds. And it's absolutely in my top 4 war movies of all time. But it's not my top one, but it's absolutely there. Just because it's just devastating. It's just devastating to see what a war like that can do on several people's minds, and even the one sane person that we consider the sane person. He, like you said, he ain't doing all that good. He's not doing that well. So it's, what is it going to take for him to lose his mind? One more thing, and it's just it's one of Martin Sheen's best performances, period. And I'm a big West Wing fan, so I watched him for 7 seasons on the West Wing, and he put a performance every single time he was on the screen. So to say that this is one of his best performances is me saying a lot, because he's fantastic. But the movie I chose for this year is going to surprise you, because I'm not a horror guy. I'm not. I don't like a lot of horror films, but Alien is damn near the perfect horror movie in a world of horror movies. You can have all the blood and guts and sprays and pop-up scares and jump scares you want, but it was done to absolute perfection by Ridley Scott and Alien. It is so good that you took a contained group of people. You brought them to a planet where you think everything is going to go good because you're just there to mine stuff. You're there to find some stuff. You're there to do whatever, to salvage whatever you can. And they bring back something unknowingly that tears their entire world apart. And it does it in the vein of Jaws. It does it in that we can't see it. We think it's around there because he's moving the camera really close, really close, really close. And then you turn around really fast and it's a cat. And then you turn around going, oh God, thank God. And there's the alien and you're dead. You don't ever get to see it until the very end. Like you get to see little glimpses of it here, little glimpses of it there, face here, hiss here. But no, man, it from the beginning to the end, this movie is absolutely perfect. It is, and a lot of people put it in the horror thriller category. I would put it more in a suspense thriller, just because I don't think it's very typical horror because there's not a lot of blood and guts. Sure, the guy getting the alien exploding out of his chest at the beginning, that's grody, but it happens so fast that you don't really get enough splatter on you. You know what I mean? It's not traditionally horror, but people are going to argue with me, and that's fine. It's horror. It is just a great movie. It is a great movie from beginning to end. We get to see, truthfully, in my opinion, one of the very few and one of the beginning female superheroes, female driven, absolute badassery. Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, is, I named one of my cats after her because they're amazing and she's amazing. And which is, why, somebody like Jennifer Lawrence coming out and saying, oh yeah, Hunger Games was the first. Bullshit. They were doing it way before you and doing it better. So don't sit there and trample on somebody else like Sigourney Weaver, who absolutely is a heroine. And she's fantastic and turned it into a whole franchise. We won't even get into that. I love the second one more than I love the first one, because they're great. But I did have some extra ones in this year as well. Other than Alien and Apocalypse Now, The Jerk with Steve Martin, fantastic movie. Star Trek: The Motion Picture. A lot of people can't get through it. It's still a great movie. It's a great directed movie. And then two of my favorite personal movies. The Muppet movie was the first Muppet movie to came out, and I almost picked it as my favorite movie for this year. Was Bill Murray in Meatballs. If you've never seen Meatballs, Dan, just watch it.
I'm sure I did. I just don't remember it. I've seen a lot of movies, Sandy.
Yeah.
Now, Alien is my. I can't. It's kind of like when I do my top films of all time list. I can't separate The Godfather and Godfather Part 2. Well, when it comes to my top horror movies of all time, it's always Alien, and Aliens is number 1 / number 2 because I can't separate those two movies. To me, they're just intertwined together for me. And they are my horror. They are my favorite horror movies, even though I can barely watch them because of anxieties and stuff about creepy crawly critters and stuff. I could watch slasher movies all day long, and people with chainsaws and knives and you name it. But when it comes to creepy crawly critters like that with giant bug looking things, that's my thing that really bothers me a lot. And Alien and Aliens are just they're just at the tippity top of that list, and it's like. I really watch them because of that, but they are my favorite because when it comes to horror movies, it's about what affects you, why it's horrific, and that type of thing affects me a lot. Normal horror movies don't affect me; those movies affect me. They're cringe. They make me cringe as a human being, So that's why, to me, they're the scariest things I can watch. So that's a great pick on your part, picking Alien there. All right, so let's move on to 1980. I actually have two in 1980, two from 1980. And the first one is the movie that is really, really hits home for me because of my relationship growing up with my father and abuses that I had when I was a child. And just the character reminded me of my father. Scenes like he's sitting down to eat a steak dinner and his wife, he's like, bring it over. You're burning the steak dinner. And he just goes off on the wife. And then he yells at the wife, clean it up. And then, and later on, he gets in a whole big thing with his second wife or whatever. He says, "Are you fucking my brother? Are you fucking my brother?" And his brother, who has done nothing but help him out, he goes and beats the dog snot out of his own brother. And the film that I'm talking about is Raging Bull, and Robert De Niro plays Jake LaMotta, a middleweight boxer or a welterweight boxer who's, he gets the name Raging Bull because of what the type of person he is in the ring, but he's an absolute recluse of a person. Doesn't get along with anybody. He's got this thing about anger, and he alienates everybody around him all the time because he's got this paranoia of someone's trying to get him, someone's kind of get one over on him and stuff. The black and white is fantastic in Raging Bull. The fight scenes with, one of my favorite quotes of all time: "You never got me down, Ray. You never got me down." He fought Sugar Ray Robinson 6 times, and he never got knocked down by even though he lost some of those fights, he never got knocked down by Ray. Ray Robinson was literally afraid of him. He knew he couldn't beat him the normal way a boxer would beat another boxer. But it just is a film that has a lot of meaning to me because of my upbringing and abuses that I suffered at the hands of my father. And I know it's not a film for everybody, but for me, it really. And it's Scorsese and De Niro once again. So obviously, that's my bag.
Pattern.
The other one, say that again.
I'm sensing a pattern, Dan.
But the other one, this is why I could not pick one movie this year. I had to pick 2, and that's a film that really resonated with me a lot, just like Raging Bull did, and that's The Empire Strikes Back. You get the Imperial March in there, and you got Hans get frozen in carbonite, and you got Luke, "I am your father." No! He cuts his hand off. Yoda, it's do or do not. There is no try or whatever the heck the quote is. I'm sure you know it.
Yep.
And it's just the locations of Bespin and Hoth at the beginning. A Star Wars movie set in a frozen wasteland. Ivan Kershner, or I think it's Ivan Kershner or somebody Kershner.
Irving Kershner.
Irving Kershner. That whole sequence on Hoth was amazing.
So good.
I saw this when I was 6 years old, Sandy, and it irrevocably changed my life as a film fan. This and the Godfather films, which I saw when I was 6, and Raging Bull, and some of these other films when I saw when I was a little kid, they just made me who I am today as far as a film critic, a film fan, a film aficionado, somebody who just loves movies, loves the movie industry. And Empire Strikes Back is just the movie that is just one of my favorites of all time. Some of my top 5 films. So I have those 2. I'm sure you might have one of those, or maybe none of those. I don't know which for 1980 is for you, Sandy.
Well, I'm not even going to beat around the bush, Dan. This year had my 2 favorite sequels released: Superman 2 and The Empire Strikes Back. And considering The Empire Strikes Back is my second favorite movie of all time, it is absolutely my favorite movie of this year. Although I'll just quickly run down the list of other movies that I thought were great in this year. Airplane, great spoof comedy starring the great Leslie Nielsen, so fantastic. Caddyshack, another sports movie that is so good. Popeye, that one's for Jeremy Adams because we both love Popeye. So
Underrated.
um,
Popeye's underrated.
underrated too. You're 100% right. Urban Cowboy, another movie with John Travolta. I don't like the country music in it but I love the story. I think the story is really really good. How serious can you take a movie that its big ending scene is a mechanical bull competition? Come on, it's just great. And then the Blues Brothers, a fantastic I call it a buddy cop movie because it's pretty much a buddy cop movie, just they're not cops. And then of course I mentioned Superman 2, but hands down, you're talking the best movie of 1982 is The Empire Strikes Back. It is sorry, 81. It
80,
is
80.
80. Now you know why I don't participate in release date matches. 1980. It's because I turned my paper over because now I don't have anything to look at. It's the best movie of 1980, hands down. It is. What other movie would be so successful where the bad guys win? Like the bad guys win in this movie throughout the entirety of it. Are there little victories that the rebellion gets? Yeah, okay, they get away. That's their big yay moment is we got away, we didn't get blasted into oblivion. But the rest of the movie they're getting their asses kicked left, right, and center, and right up until the end where Darth Vader reveals that. And it's so it's so powerful that everybody in the theater this is the first Star Wars movie that I actually remember going to the theater and watching it with a group of people on opening night and hearing people when he says this, hearing and remembering the audible gasp from the crowd when he's, no, I am your father.
I
And you
know.
just hear that from 200-300 people in a theater, and you're just like, I literally heard people say no, in the theater. So and then seconds later Luke says it, and it's, oh, it's not true. His Oscar moment, after he has his hand chopped off, and he makes that decision to just jump off. I'm not joining you, punk. Thought you won, did you? And chucks himself over the edge. It's a perfect movie. It is absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. Not I know a lot of people give their George Lucas crap about his dialogue. That doesn't happen in this movie. Everything is said. You know, they Lando brings them into the dining hall, and Darth Vader, we'd be honored if you join us for dinner. You could take that as something a stupid line, but it means so much in that thing. Like, he's not freaking out, he's not threatening him because he knows he doesn't have to. He says, we would love to have you for dinner, come on in, sit on down. And then he goes to torture them. You know what I mean? It's so perfect. Like, the movie itself is so perfect that it's I judge every other movie by it. So, like, if you can't come up to this level, don't. Just don't. It's why it's my favorite sequel of all time. And like I said, my second favorite sequel, Superman 2. My third favorite sequel is Back to the Future Part 2. So you've been pretty good company when you're naming those three franchises. So it's just a fantastic movie. It just is. You mentioned the Imperial March. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. When you walk around the mall and you listen to people's ringtones going off, if you hear the Imperial March more than once, that's just normal. Going off on ringers. So it just is that powerful of a movie, and it made that much of an imprint on everybody who saw its minds. So 1980, hands down, Empire Strikes Back. But Raging Bull is a great choice as well, especially if you're a big fan of De Niro and a big fan of Scorsese.
Yeah, and that's when you're a kid and you're 6 years old and you're seeing The Empire Strikes Back for the first time, and those things, how that really resonates with a 6-year-old child who's just who's had kind of a rough upbringing, you know what I mean? And then you're seeing something like this that really emotionally affects somebody, and that's why it's not my top movie of all time, but it's in my top 5 movies of all time. You know what I mean? And so I'm right there with you when you say I judge. There's certain movies that you judge all other movies by, and Empire Strikes Back is one of those movies. The Godfather films for me are those movies, and my number one movie is from way back. But all right, let's move on to 1981. And we're gonna go. I mean, there is a scene. Sandy came up with this. He said, "Oh, I'm sensing a theme." The theme is John Williams has done amazing scores in so many movies, but this time he works with 2 of his favorite people, and that's George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, and it's a freaking great movie. And that theme is at the beginning when he's running from the boulder, and he's running from those guys at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, you're like, now this is what I call a freaking movie, and an adventure movie, and a fun movie. And obviously, Harrison Ford, we saw him years ago with American Graffiti. We've seen him in The Conversation. But Star Wars and Indiana Jones are the two characters. Han Solo and Indiana Jones are the two characters that everybody knows Harrison Ford from. But he really made this character his own, and he really was a fun character. And just the locations and the action and everything in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark that I just absolutely love. So I had to pick, and there could have been some other films in there I could have picked, but I went with Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. Do you pick the same one as me, Sandy, or something different?
I did. I did pick Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, it's 81. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, it's Indiana Jones. It's a big rolling boulder, running down, chasing him through what looks like. I swear to God, when he was getting into that mountain, there was no way it was that long to get to the treasure. And then him coming out with the ball chasing him, it takes him way longer. And you're just like, I love it. It's great. Listen, when Steven Spielberg does a movie, you wake up. When George Lucas makes a movie, you wake up. When they both do a movie, your eyes go wide and you're like, damn, okay, this is going to be a freaking hell of a ride. And it is. I mean, it's a fantastic, fantastic movie. I don't want to talk about it because you already talked about it and said everything that's good about it. So it's fantastic. The movie that I do want to talk about was my second pick for this one, and it's Taps. A lot of people don't know this movie, but it is it's about a military school that kids go to. They learn military procedure. It's a military school. They go there from a young age, and they learn everything that it is to be in a military background, and they do that. It's got people in it like Tom Cruise and
Sean Penn.
Sean Penn, thank you, Sean Penn. And they got some other really, really good people. It's another good ensemble, young cast of actors that come out of this. And what ends up happening is they learn that their school is going to be shut down, that their commanding officer is going to be relieved of duty, and the kids say no. And they go in to get all the munitions, and they basically hold their school hostage because they don't want to leave. They want to continue doing what they're doing. That is fantastic, but it is unrealistic. But it is such a good movie to see the dichotomy. It's almost like Animal House, or not Animal House, but Animal Farm with humans. It's almost like it's almost where you take a group of people and make them do everything themselves and see how it turns. Like, do the older students become unbearing? Do they order everybody around, or are they helpful? Do they hurt? And you find all those people. You know who you can trust. You find out who you can trust and who you can't trust very easily in these situations. It's just a well acted, directed movie throughout its entirety, and I really, really wish people would go and take a look at it. So that's why I'm bringing it up today. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, hands down, the best movie of '81. And Dan is frozen, so I will keep going. All right. So what else did I have that year? I had Porky's. That's great. I had Stripes, great Bill Murray movie, early Bill Murray movie. I had Clash of the Titans. It has got a cult following, and they made it into a new movie with Sam Worthington, and Dragon Slayer, a really, really good fantasy movie with Peter McNichol in it. And yeah, it's all good. But you're back now, Dan. I can see your eyes blinking. Hooray!
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sandy, holding down the fort there. All right, so let's move on to 1982, and it's a theme. We're going to go back to Mr. John Williams and Mr. Steven Spielberg, and that is E.T., the Extraterrestrial, another great theme. And as a little 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, I mean, I was just absolutely blown away. My mother took us to a drive-in theater. Oh yeah, a drive-in theater. You drive your car when you watch a movie in the theater. How interesting is that? And we saw E.T. for the first time, and I just was I was mesmerized by Elliot and this relationship with this little alien, and then Drew Barrymore as his sister, and the score once again. And I tell this story to anybody that I can, because it just, I felt it when I was watching the movie as a kid. When he's on that bicycle and he's going up through the sky, and it just looked like he went right through the screen and went right off into the sky. I felt that when I was watching it as a little 8-year-old kid. I couldn't believe what I was watching. I said, "Oh my God, he's going off into the sky." Maybe it's just how the sky was compared to the color of the screen at the time, and it just looked like that to me as an 8-year-old. Things are bigger and they're more, they're more brighter and more. But E.T. to me is just one of those films that I can't say enough about, because I felt like I was Elliot. I felt like I was, the whole, I had a mother and a father, and I had an abusive father and brothers and sisters. So I wasn't in the single parent household or any of that kind of stuff. And you see that, but what I did kind of like is you see the growing of California, how it was growing at that time. And yeah, E.T. the extraterrestrial, E.T. phone home. Oh my God.
Um,
Tears coming down my face.
Absolutely. I will say this. I did not pick ET as my pick for this year, but I will say this. I love ET, not for what everybody else loves it for, but because at that time, I'm going to say it in the same breath as I say ET and Stranger Things have something in common with me. And it is the group of friends riding their bikes everywhere, doing everything together. That was me and my friends. Me and my friends, we would ride our bikes everywhere. We would get to a field that we wanted to play, and we would just toss our bikes, and they would jump off of them and they go rolling off and crashing. That's what we did. So when I see movies like ET, I go, yeah, that was me. That was me at that exact time. I was 10 years old. So that was exactly what I was doing with my friends. The extraterrestrial in it is cute. He fills a purpose throughout the whole movie. Him and Elliot share a bond that is extraordinary. Young Drew Barrymore is great in that movie. But for me, it's the nostalgia of my own life that resonates with that movie. So that's why I love Stranger Things, because I get that same, that's, I nothing that like that in Stranger Things ever happened to me when I was a kid. All right. So I don't have that in common. But the whole, you know, coming up with plans, writing everything on crayon and making maps of stuff, that was me. That was our friend group. We made forts. We did that stuff, but everywhere we traveled in a pack with our bikes. And that was the way it was. So E.T. is one of those feel good movies for me, just to sit back and get that feel of that reminiscence that I remembered when I was a kid at that age too. But I did lie earlier. I said that my top three sequels were Empire Strikes Back, Superman 2, and Back to the Future Part 3. I forgot, in my actual number two movie is from 1982, and it is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. That is also not the movie that I picked, although it's absolutely banana fest. But some other movies that I picked in there are going to be what I picked: Conan the Barbarian. You can say whatever you want about Arnold Schwarzenegger starring in Terminator, which he did. This was his actual first, like, real first role. He got into a meat of it. He got to be exactly who he is, a bad man when it comes to just being his full, bodybuilder self. He just, they just let him be Arnold, and he was. And that movie was the first R-rated movie I ever got into the theater to go and see. I had permission from my mom. She wrote a note and gave it to me, and we gave it to the person that owned the theater and knew us all, and my parents. Small towns, what can I say? And we got to go and see that, which was fantastic. The Dark Crystal, still resonating today. Netflix had, the remake for it on there as well. Great movie, scared the bejesus out of me, like you wouldn't believe. For the most part, those freaking things kill me. Tron. I must have carried a frisbee around with me for a month after Tron, thinking that I can fling that frisbee anywhere and it would just come back to me. No, I had to go and get it every single time. Um, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, An Officer and a Gentleman, and like I said, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan are all great picks for that year. But my favorite movie from that year is First Blood.
I love First Blood. My favorite action
I
movie of all time. I
it
love First
is
Blood.
it is say whatever you want about all the rest of the Rambo movies. All right, I can take Rambo First Blood Part 2. It's all right. Third one sucks. Fourth one sucks. Fifth one sucks. The first one, where he is just John Rambo and he's just coming back from war and he's walking, he's got his green jacket on, he's got his long hair, he's got a bit of a scruff on his beard. He's just walking. You know, he's got no car. He just got back. He's a military person.
He
He's
just
got
wants a hot
nothing.
meal. He
He
just
just
wants
wants
a
to
hot
find
meal,
some place.
Sandy.
He just wants to find some place to sit down, have a hot meal, and just not get pestered. And what does Brian Dennehy do? He just gets on his ass right from the beginning and treats him like a transient hobo that doesn't deserve his respect. And then even when they find out that he's a war hero, that he's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, that he's a freaking Green Beret, they still don't care. They still treat him like shit and they push him too far. And then the animal comes out. And John Rambo takes this city and everybody in it down to Pound Town and treats them like his bitch. And like there is nothing that they can do to stop this guy. Nothing. They fly a helicopter. They shoot at him while he's hanging off a freaking rock face wall, trying to scale it. Who does that to get away from people? Goes down a straight cliff and is doing it until they start shooting at him. And then he's got to jump, land through the trees, get on his ground. Then he picks up a rock and disables the helicopter. This is what I'm talking about. How perfect is this guy? He's just, he's he's a literal killing machine. It's what we trained him, it's what they trained him to do. And now he is 100% in combat mode. And they have no local cops. Are you kidding me? Local cops. Like what he does
David
to Hope,
Caruso.
what he does, exactly. He's the only one that's smart in that entire thing. He's like, dude, what are we doing out here? This guy's gonna pick us off one by one. And it's exactly what he does. And it's filmed in the little town of Hope, which was just a 35-minute trip from where I grew up in Merritt, BC. So you can actually go there and there's a picture, Welcome to Hope, and you can stick your head through a sign and it's John Rambo. And you go there. I actually have a picture. My mom has a picture somewhere with me sticking my head through John Rambo's body. And you could like he wrecks that town, like wrecks it. Just it's done. It's all over, and it's one guy. And his admission when Colonel Troutman comes into the store, into the cop shop, and talks him down and gets him to like his him explaining, what it felt like to have one of his buddies is like, yeah, something happened and I picked up my guy and his legs were gone. They weren't there. His legs were blown off and he's crying and he's so upset is one of the most powerful scenes that you can in that vein, in that Vietnam veteran kind of a vein. If you take the movies that have been his admission and his talking about it to him, feeling safe and just letting it all come out because it's finally at the top and he just has to let it go. It'll make you cry. Like it'll if it doesn't like well you up, then you don't have a heart. You just don't, because it is really, really powerful. So for me, 1982, I have to choose First Blood as my favorite movie from that year, just because it's one of those movies that whenever it's on, I watch it. Like no matter where it starts,
You make
when
me
I've
want to
turned it
watch
on,
it right
I
now.
watch it. Yeah,
You make me
exactly.
want to go watch it. Put it in. You make me want to go put it in my Blu-ray player right now, Sandy.
Right?
I wrote when same thing. I had you write the review about Otis
Yep,
or
exactly.
Ned Beatty when he died because I knew how much. And I ended up writing the one about Brian Dennehy. I mean,
Oh, I know.
it's one of the best villains in movie history. It's just a sheriff of a town who turns
And that's
into the
who
biggest
turns in.
asshole around, right?
Exactly. Like he's not the typical villain, but he's
No.
the villain in every town. He's the
Yeah.
cop that
Yeah.
has too much control. He's
Yeah.
the one that
Yeah.
wants to make everything. He just, hi everybody, as he's driving. He's not doing any cop work. He's doing this. He's
Yeah.
waving
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
people. And when that power, when that confidence in him gets threatened, he turns into the absolute worst purple. And his buddy, the cop that
Oh,
dies, Galt,
Oh
He's
god,
just a
man,
flat
he's
out
good too.
douchebag,
Yeah,
and
they're
him
all good.
getting his
They're
head
all good
crushed
in
when
it.
he falls out of that helicopter was like the best thing ever,
Yeah,
because he's just a dick, and
yeah,
instead of treating our veterans like we should
yeah,
be treating them,
yeah,
they treat them like this,
yeah,
and that's why they come back and they're so disillusioned with how life is, because this is how they get treated every single time. Like they don't get,
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't get, hey buddy, come on over here, have a free meal, thanks for your service. It's get out of here, hobo. And
Unbelievable.
you can
Yeah,
just we've trained these people to do things, and you don't ever want to push them too far because they can do those things. So
yeah.
that's what happens in this movie, and it is it's amazing.
And we didn't even mention Blade Runner that came out that year.
Yeah, yeah,
So a friend of mine, Scott Mance, loves to talk about 1982. I was 8 years old, and I saw First Blood that year, and I was absolutely blown away. It's the movie that started the action genre.
it really
By
did.
the way, people, Jaws started the blockbuster. Well, First Blood was the film that broke ground on the. I guess Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and First Blood were kind of the big two that you would say that started the action genre.
Well,
But
and if you take the action genre in the early 80s to like the mid 90s, of the stars that were the big action stars of that decade, you've got Bruce Willis, you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you've got Sylvester Stallone. And I will say this: I think that Stallone is the first to do an action, like a true action movie, because Conan the Barbarian, it's more of a fantasy action than that, because he's a barbarian and he's in some fake world. Terminator hadn't come out yet, so
and Indy was a
um,
period piece.
exactly. So it's I think that it was Stallone that started the real action genre that became the action movie genre that we know today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's move on to 1983, and I think you're going to be surprised by my pick here. Well, you might not be surprised, but you're going to be surprised because I probably didn't go with something that you probably thought I would go with. 83, another great year for cinema, but for me, because of my second favorite actor of all time, and love gangster films, and I just say hello to my little friend, and just this whole gangster lifestyle was always something that I was it resonated with me as a kid. And but this is a Spanish kind of Miami, this whole world of Miami. You had F. Murray Abraham in here, you had Michelle Pfeiffer in there, but Al Pacino is just bigger than life, completely different than Michael Corleone, but equally just evil in his own way. And I picked Scarface in 1983. And then as decades go by, Scarface became this bigger than life thing for gangsters and gangster rappers. And not that I'm a gangster or a gangster rapper or any of that stuff, but it became this kind of like they wanted to wear the shirts and they wanted to be who Tony Montana was. And this is a remake of a movie from the 50s, um, completely different than. And then that was a remake of a movie from like the early 20s. There's
Yeah.
been this is I think it's like three different Scarfaces, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, Sandy. Isn't this
I think you're right. I actually thought there might have been one more
yeah, there's
that it got
early
done, but
20s there was one, then there was something in the 50s, and then there was this one, and getting a
yeah,
new one we are.
I think that's
Which
the new one that I'm thinking about.
yeah. Either I thought there was a silent Scarface, then there was the 50s with Muni. Is it Paul Muni or somebody? I can't remember
Yeah,
already,
me
but
neither.
yeah, but Scarface is my pick for 83, and I'm guessing you're probably surprised at that I didn't pick something else.
Actually, no. When I saw that, I was like, "Yep, that fits." You're a crime guy. You like crime movies. Like all of your Scorsese, De Niro ones. There's an essence of crime. There's an essence of the lower part of existence,
The
where
seedier
you're
side of
struggling
existence.
to you're struggling, to survive and struggling to get ahead. So no, it's a very theme, and that's the theme of Scarface. I mean, it's Tony Montana, man. He's got to go, and he's got to be the most famous, most richest person of all time. He wants to be the man. Well, to be the man, you got to beat the man, and that's what Tony does. He's not shy. He's not shy about anything, and he it's I often look up the most quotable movies of all time, and one of the most quotable movies of all time is Scarface. There's literally a page of this much on the computer page of quotes that you can pull from Scarface. It's really, even if you don't, like you said it, like it's made such a prominent role in everybody's lives, in the world of movies, that other movies reference it. New Jack City with Wesley Snipes. That's another great crime movie that gets overlooked a lot. But they're sitting there watching Scarface as they're planning their dominion over New York City, and they're there. He gets up on the table and he's like, "Say hello to my little friend." Like once a movie starts seeping into other movies and into other parts of our lives,
The
that it's made a
lexicon of our
difference.
lives.
Exactly. So it's a great movie for what it is, and the fact that it's touched so many different parts of our lives, that it definitely deserves a spot on there. It was not the pick that I picked. It was one of the ones that I had as honorable mentions. Um, you might be surprised at my pick for this one. I will say a couple of the ones that I had for honorable mentions first. I thought there was a lot of good movies. Risky Business came out this year, really put Tom Cruise on the map, as did the movie that I did pick for this year. Trading Places is another great movie. Eddie Murphy's start in movies, and All the Right Moves, another Tom Cruise movie. He seemed to really be around in 81, 82, 83. But All the Right Moves is a great football movie. Shows you the way high school football is, in that day and age. It's not quite, lower 48 Texas type of football, but it's still pretty serious. And they take this stuff pretty serious, because back in those days, those small towns, the only way to get out of them was
Pittsburgh
to get a
area.
scholarship. Exactly, Pittsburgh. So you get a scholarship to go to college to play ball, you're out of the town and you can do something with your lives.
Yep.
And of course, the last one, not my pick, but Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi makes its appearance for the finality of the trilogy. I remember exactly where I was in for this movie to go to the theater. I've seen every Star Wars movie that's come out in the theater. So I didn't make any many didn't yeah, absolutely. But my pick for 1983 started out as a book, and I read it I read it in elementary school and loved it. I actually have a hardbound copy of it that my wife gave me for Christmas, and I read it all the time. And I've watched this movie 100 times. It was also directed by one of my favorite directors of all time, Francis Ford Coppola. It is the seriously overstaffed, hot cast of all time in a movie, and that will be The Outsiders. The Outsiders is a movie from book written by S.E. Hinton. It's about a group of greasers who are on the wrong side of the tracks. They have to struggle for everything that they get. The main character, Ponyboy, his family, his brothers are Soda Pop Curtis and Daryl Curtis. Daryl played by Patrick Swayze, and Soda Pop played by Rob Lowe. His Soda Pop's best friend is Tom Cruise. You got Emilio Estevez in this movie. You've got all kinds of people that just were nobodies, and they were in this movie. Diane Lane is in this movie. It is just a great coming of age movie to watch. It's well acted. C. Thomas Howell plays Soda Pop, or Ponyboy, and it's from his perspective that we see this. He's writing this story as part of his final submission for his English class that he's in. So he writes the story called The Outsiders, and it's basically Ralph Macchio plays Ponyboy's best friend, um, uh, and it's so good. I don't even want to give anything away. I know it's a 30, 40-year-old movie, but if you haven't seen it, I recommend go see it. Please watch it. It's everywhere. You don't have to watch it. You can start to see where some of these people that are now old men, are how
Dead.
where they got their start. What did they, Matt Dillon is in this movie too. It's a great movie. It started the careers for so many, which is why I put it on this list, because it was so influential to what we got, all the movies afterwards that we got because of this one movie and the actors that starred in it. I can't say this enough. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you about these movies, Dan, but The Outsiders is my favorite movie and favorite book from 1983.
Yeah, The Outsiders. I absolutely love The Outsiders. I've watched it so many times myself. Sandy, I'm glad you picked The Outsiders. I thought you were going to pick it, the Return of the Jedi. I saw a double header of Return of the Jedi and Annie back to back, and that was my double header when I was
That's a
9
weird
years
couple,
old. So yeah, what a weird double
right?
double header, right? But yeah, I love I've read the book multiple times, like you said, and the weird thing about The Outsiders is he actually filmed Rumblefish and The Outsiders back to back
Back to
in
back.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. A whole some of the people were different in Rumblefish that weren't in The Outsiders, but they're both films that take place in that part of the country, and it's
Yep,
interesting that Coppola did both of them, Rumblefish and Outsiders. But
he
like you
did.
said, Outsiders has resonated with so many people because of the cast and the story and whatnot. And I got a Studio Canal 4K a couple last year. Oh my god,
Nice.
which was it was restored by the person. He has his own guy that restores all his films.
Nice.
Zoetrope does, and they restored The Outsiders for this Kino Lorber. I mean, Studio Canal. Oh my god, it just jumps
Oh,
off the screen. It's so
ah,
gorgeous, Sandy. It's
I
so
haven't seen it.
gorgeous.
Oh, it's
Oh, you
amazing.
gotta see it. You gotta look for that
I
4K
gotta.
version of it. Oh my god, it's amazing. But yeah, I'll tell you what, Sandy, this has been fantastic talking about these 10 years of my life, these first 10 years of my life with you. You were the right person to get to talk about a lot of these movies. You had so much to say, and it makes me wish I could have picked two movies for all of these years, because some of your picks were like, oh man, why didn't I pick that one? Or why didn't I pick that one? But I couldn't pick two for every year, even though a friend of mine said, why don't you just do two for every year? But I decided to go with one on most of the years. I went with one, and a couple of years I went with two. Over the next few decades of the videos in the thing, you're going to see that I couldn't choose just one in some of these years. But I want to say thank you very much. Is there any place you want people to find you? Is there anything, or you just want to kind of hide in your own little world that you're
No,
living
you
in?
know what? You guys can find me on Facebook. It's S Robinson 1799 on Facebook. You can just look me up by Sandy Robinson. I know I've put the Sandman in a couple times the search, and I come up for it. So you guys can find me anywhere. I like to talk about movies. You can follow me on Letterbox at the same address, 1799 at Letterbox. Uh, yeah, but other than that, I've just been kind of keeping it simple these days, and just every once in a while, somebody like you will ask me to do something like this, and I jump at it. I love doing this type of stuff. I love talking movies with you because we come from the same, age group, and that's something I've always valued about our friendship. But we both have very, very different uh genres that we like for movies, which makes our conversations interesting, because we're not just sitting there going, like, we only matched up on what, 2 or 3 of the years that we had movies for. So everything else was a little bit different, and that's what makes these shows, and what makes them able to go back and watch them later, something that you can appreciate, because it's two different opinions, but it's all about movies, and it's just fun to talk about them with somebody, especially you.
Yeah, well, that's why when I wanted to celebrate my life of 49, almost 50 years, we're getting. I wanted to get distinctive voices that could talk about the films that I was going to talk about, but maybe didn't exactly have the same kinds of likes that I had. So, and that would be a really good dichotomy of how we could have the conversation. And that's exactly what we did. As the years went by, the conversation got better and better, and you were really championing some other films, which I kind of wish I could have championed because I really love some. But yeah, and I'm going to be doing 4 more of these. So we're going to have
There you go.
4 groups of, or 1, or possibly I might have 2 people in a couple of them. All depends. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but we're gonna go to the next batch with a friend of ours. I'm gonna say it right here. So if people want to watch the entire series, a friend of Sandy's and a friend of mine, his name is Jeremy Adams, is going to be doing the next 4. He's got the heart up. That's the heart of our friend Jeremy. So he's going to do from 1984 to 1993. So we'll get to see that, and we'll see how many films that him and I have in common from those years. I'm sure we're going to have a bunch of different ones too, just like you and I had a bunch. But that's what's fun about doing this. I'm enjoying my life in movies with my friends, and so and if we have something different, that's fine too. So you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Letterboxd, Dan Allen. Also, I am a film critic in Orlando, Florida, sunny Florida. It's only March 1st, and it's already in the 80s here, where I write film. I'm a film critic, and I write film reviews and TV shows. And I also write for another website called disappointmentmedia.com. So if you want to read anything that I wrote, those are the 2 places. And I'm posting all my reviews on Letterboxd under Dan Allen. So if you want to go there, you could see a lot of my reviews. I think I'm close to 640 reviews on Letterboxd. All my reviews that I posted to those 2 websites, from thefourthrow.com and disappointmentmedia.com. And there's a lot of anniversaries. There's a lot of in memoriams, all kinds of different articles that I've posted on all of those sites. So for Sandy Robinson and myself, look forward to part 2 coming very soon of My Life, My Love, 50 Years in Film.